I'm Miguel. Today I'll be talking to you about my experience working on product management in the privacy domain. And I'll share a little bit more about who I am, more about some ideas that I've learned as a PM, and then some examples of what I've seen works when developing privacy-related products and what doesn't work, and then some takeaways. So in terms of intro, as I said, I'm a product manager. I mostly focus on internal facing products. So that means that most of my customers and my clients and my users are internal developers. I have traditionally focused on pets, privacy enhancing technologies. If you've heard about some of the developments that Google has released on differential privacy, the odds are that I've participated in some capacity. I also work on other data protection projects like data minimization. I also work on fully homomorphic encryption. I've worked on federated learning, and I'm currently focused on privacy, safety, and security. You see that picture of me. I'm taking a cooking class. I'm doing tiramisu, and I thought it was apt to show this picture because I feel that product management in privacy is very layered, even more than if you do it in a consumer fashion. So yeah, that's the reason for that picture. So very short ideas on product management that I think are key. So especially at Google, product managers are told to focus exclusively on the user and trying to figure out what the user needs and what the user wants. And when we're dealing with infrastructure projects, that's a little bit more complicated because our customers are internal users. And a lot of the times, the privacy is not their top priority, so we need to find out what is the overlap between their goals and our goals. Some of the ways that people or PMs measure user goals is through user research, which means doing user interviews or doing user testing. One of the ideas is to just have a very cheap wireframe and show it to the users to see how they react. And then finally, having very clear metrics as to what success means and failure means. This all comes together on this idea of personas. Personas are these archetypical users that represent a segment of users alongside with their needs, their expectations, and their goals. So you can imagine that an archetypical persona can be John Doe, who is a journalist working on national security issues that needs to guarantee confidentiality of their sources. And then the next step is to come up with critical user journeys, which are the steps that this persona needs to take to achieve their goal. If they're trying to exchange secure emails with their source, you can imagine that John accesses the secure email provider. It then asks the source to provide the details. The source then receives the email, replies, and then John receives the email. You might feel that this is like very obvious, but I feel that in a lot of conversations when we're talking about privacy, having these very clear user journeys helps ground the conversation, because otherwise many people have many different ideas in their head, and you can really fast get into scope creep of features that are not really needed for the user. And the last step is to come up with the solutions. We started with the persona and the user journey, and then the idea is to bring all of these together and come up with some ideas and solutions. So I'll walk through one example that I've been working recently that has been relatively successful, and that has been data minimization at Google. What you're seeing on the right side of the slides is a graph of how much stale data we have deleted over the last 3 quarters. And the reason why I'm presenting it is because I have been shocked as to how much data we have been deleting. When we started this project, I never thought that was possible. And I think when I was reflecting as to why this has been, I think it's been because we have really tried to focus on the user on what they need. So some of the questions that we had when we were starting the project were, the first one was whether the data owners would be willing to delete stale data. And here we were trying to figure out if our goal, which our goal was to delete stale data, was going to be aligned with the user goal. The second question that we needed was to answer was, what information do these people need to make a confident deletion decision? You can imagine that if we tell people we're confident that you don't need this data, then probably people are going to delete it. So our question was, how do we get to that state? The last question was whether we were solving a real problem for this set of users. And you can imagine that a problem that these people face is that they're running out of quota. So if they're running out of quota, they need to find a way to delete the data. And if we were the ones that we were making it easier for them to delete that data, then there was a win-win situation where we were going to be deleting data that was stale and that was potentially privacy risky, but also all of these customers were going to free up quota for whatever new project they were going to have. So some of the principles that we had when developing this solution was, first of all, we wanted to avoid scope creep. I think in my years working in privacy, I've seen that it's very easy to just add a lot of privacy features and the product just gets very complicated. Therefore, we wanted to build something that was very simple. Our assumption is that people already have many things to do in their daily lives. Privacy is not the top priority, so we just wanted to make sure that whatever we built was very actionable and very easy to use for them. And finally, we also wanted to find an easy way to do a proof of concept. I think this is not something that happens a lot of the times in privacy. People get very invested in building privacy things that they find very exciting, but we're not very good at building very nimble solutions that can give us a signal of whether this project has the opportunity to succeed or to fail. So the way that we solved this, and if you remember, I was talking to you about wireframes. Our wireframe and our first proof of concept was an email. What we did was find data that was likely to be stale. And I think an important point here is that we didn't have all of the data that we needed when we started this project. We didn't have the last access timestamp or other signals that are good at identifying stale data. So what we did was that we looked at data that had been created a long time ago, more than 2 years ago, with the assumption that it was more likely that older data that was created a long time ago was going to be stale. The second thing that we did was just send email to the owners. That was our wireframe. We identified the owners of this quote-unquote stale data. We sent them an email, and then we asked them, would you be willing to delete the data? And if you remember, I also mentioned that it's very important to measure, to have metrics. And we measured the response rate from all of these people that were replying to the emails. The response was really surprising because we got responses from 80% of the people who we emailed. That was a lot more than I was expecting. And then a lot of them actually replied back to us asking us to show them how to delete the data. Even though the email said, I've identified data that's likely stale, just confirm to us if that's the case or not. Many people were eager to delete the data. So that eagerness also took us by surprise. And the other thing that took us by surprise was that about half of the people that replied were willing to consider deleting the data. So that gave us confidence to build the next iteration of the project. And what happened next was that we added more signals. So we started working on adding last access timestamp alongside other signals. And then we continued following our hacky approach. You can imagine that in an optimal scenario, you have a beautiful UI where people can mass select the amount, all of their stale data, and then just click a button and delete it. But that was going to be very expensive. So what we did was just we leveraged Google's internal ticket system to alert people on what stale data they had. The next thing that we did was also continue this principle of making it as easy as possible for people to use the tooling. And we provided them with the path of the data that was likely stale, but also we provided them with a command that they could copy paste to be able to delete the data. So as a result, a lot of data was deleted or has been deleted and continues to be deleted more than we ever expected. We've had a lot of happy customers. They are very happy because they think that all of these alerts are very actionable. And for many of them, they're very meaningful because some of the groups at Google are having trouble with storage. So they're really excited to find as much data that they can delete for their new projects. And in terms of next steps, as I was mentioning, we are working on this UI to make it very easy for people to delete their data. And we're also expanding, of course, into AI. There's a huge, apparently researchers at Google just produce tons of checkpoints that take a lot of space. So we need to figure out how to reduce that space. So that's also something that we're working on. Now, in terms of what didn't work, if I can summarize what didn't work in a line is everything that we did in that first example were things that we didn't do in this second example. The TLDR is that a few years ago, we were building an overly complex privacy product. And the first failure point that I think happened was that we were building the product for the sake of privacy. This was a time where pets were very fancy in the 2018 or 19. So a few people decided just to put them all together, see whatever was going to happen, and come up with a use case for that. And I think that's where the second mistake was. We didn't test whether there was user demand for it. We were just looking at the overall external environment, what was happening with Cambridge Analytica and so on, but also with GDPR, and people made a prospective decision of building this magical product with all of the bells and whistles that you can imagine, assuming that it was going to be used. As a result, since we were so far removed from the user needs, we built a massively complex solution. We didn't have a clear user need, so every week we kept adding features and features on top of the features that we were building. So at the end of the day, we built a massively complex product. And when we did find a customer that was willing to use it, the feedback that they gave us was brutal. They said, this product is incredibly hard to use, and on top of that, the quality of the data that I'm getting out of it is terrible. That gives you an example of not building something for a very long time without getting user feedback, and not building something for the sake of privacy without really trying to figure out what the user is trying to do and what their goals are. What happened afterwards was that we never had a client that was successful in using that product. Google was then hit by layoffs, and there was no way to justify us working on a product that no one was using, and we shelved it. And as a spoiler alert, the demand for this hypothetical, beautiful, privacy-preserving product never materialized. And my guess is that it will never materialize because we never really tested the assumptions as to whether users wanted something like this. So some takeaways. I think it's very important to have a very clear and realistic goal and test it as you go. Start with the user. Because I think that for privacy products to be successful, they need to be really easily used by the users. And finally, understand what's the value proposition for the users. I think that a lot of the times, most people or most users consider privacy to be a tax. And if we continue empowering that mindset, we're just going to build products that are very hard for people to use, and people are going to hate them a lot, and make them less likely, make it less likely for future products to be used. So I think that one of the lessons that I've learned throughout these years is to really understand what the overlap is between our goals and the goals that the users have, so that we are able to build something that actually delivers value to the user. And now, Q&A. Yeah.